How broadly should we try to use the term weird girl? The foundational point of weird girl is to put the alienation into ourselves, to see that that's the target. It's not this out there thing, an enemy figure, an outside problem that if we can overcome, we'll have some sense of harmony and the way things should be. We're getting to the way in which we're involved in the problem ourselves, not as a point of finitude or frailty or mistakes, but as something that we create in order to engage with the world ourselves. So you need a concept of both dialectics and unalive drive, basically. So dialectics is getting to our own involvement and not viewing our engagement with reality as this out there thing that we can't quite penetrate, so we stand against it and we're just figuring out who we are by palpating the borders of reality. In philosophy, this is Kant. We're dealing with dialectics where we're looking at things in terms of a circle, not as a sense of, harmonious wholes, but as a structure that we see through that we've created ourselves. So we're dealing with a gap that connects things, basically. This is Hegel. So that's the huge principal point of weird girl fiction. We're getting to the way in which we create this fantasy, this weirdness, this violence ourselves. And if there's an enemy figure, like in Eyes Are the Best Part, this enemy figure is part of the impediment we're engaging, and we're overcoming it to get to our own fantasy on the other side of it. So we're not getting to this harmonious whole or destroying the enemy figure. We're not building ourselves up that way. That takes us to ourselves rather than to who we think we should be. So in terms of masculinity and femininity, the girl is the privileged position of weird girl fiction. It's not the only position to be had. So it's privileged because we're engaging with the hysterical question of who we are for the world. This is foundational to who we are. It's not just this sexist problem, even though sexism, etc., engages with it. It tries to build us up into what we're not, basically. This is a question that we have to all struggle with ourselves, men and women, trans people, etc. The difference is that men try to just take what the world tells us and say, okay, I'll be that. So it's a disavowing of the way in which this is a problem. And the feminine position is a tarrying with that, a being open to the way in which we are open in this relation of not, having a firm identity in our place in the world. So this also gets expressed with sexism in terms of how sexism throws all these different incompatible things into our identity. And so weird girl fiction is a privileged point to engage with that. The ultimate example is Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, where we get into Laura Palmer's shoes. But this is a problem for everyone. It's contingent upon everyone to engage with this weird girl dynamic. And so that can also be in different stages of life. But when we are parents or are committed to careers later in life, these are ways of shirking back from this foundational problem that's basically coming of age, who we are. Some of the best weird girl fiction is engaging the masculine side of things too. So A Touch of Jen is the weird couple. We get this weird dynamic focused on the couple is focused on a mutual friend that they're engaged in a sexual fantasy towards, and they both have their ways of figuring out who they are and building up who they are with their weird fantasies separately, but glancing off of the same antagonistic issue. For David Lynch, David Lynch is the master here. Lost Highway in particular, I view as very weird girl, even though it's incredibly masculine. This is a masculine hysterical problem of being in a couple and being in radical self-doubt about your status of the couple, that leading to violence, and then the fantasy that spawns us off into. So it's weird guy, you can basically frame it as, but it's dealing with the same stuff from the same philosophical grounding point. The weirdness also is simple. It's our everyday engagement with reality, not just these fantastical, surrealist ones that are this big spectacle. With David Lynch, Straight Story is the simple story of a man who says, I'm going to go meet my brother across the country. I am poor. All I have with me is a tractor. I'm going to ride that tractor across the country until I find my brother. That's the story. So it's an incredibly weird act in an incredibly everyday position. With Cline, the guest, we are just a person trying to persist in an upper class community without any means to do so, and we are holding on to the one fantasy that keeps us there, this hope of reconciling with our lover. So we're getting to this impossibility of being able to sit still. We have to spawn fantasies. We have to undercut ourselves in these fantasies. There's a lot to say about fantasy, but while some fantasies take us far away, engaging fantasy also is engaging desire and the inability to be taken away. So my year of rest and relaxation and The Guest are clear examples of being unable to connect with the fantasy, but then where do we break into this fantasy? So we're severed from world. We're not able to, be in our own skin, and that's difficult, acutely difficult. But by persisting in it, we do break into change through fantasy. We do actually get there eventually. So with Weird Girl, you can't reach these points of finitude that fully deny it. It is completely not Weird Girl to cut off and say that's as far as our relation gets us and it's a dead end. We do find these points of breaking out. That's the point. That's what makes it Weird Girl. We fall into fantasy by sticking with what's most acutely difficult in our inability to do so. So desire. Desire and not being connected to things is the pathway to fantasy. It's the hunger, very basically. And it's not a given. Year of Rest and Relaxation and The Guest are, these acute separatings of the world and how by struggling with that separation, we actually get out of it. So it's a very delicate territory because a lot of fiction will engage this material and lead into statements of finitude, and this is as far as it goes. So while obviously finitude is an aspect of life, Weird Girl fiction is about how confronting that finitude gets us to infinitude. We fall into the fantasy and it transports us, it takes us out of our own skin, it changes who we are. So if Weird Girl fiction stops there, it's not Weird Girl. It's just not. Likewise, if we're falling into this sense of wholeness with the universe, that's another shirking back from our own weirdness and the way in which our engagement with fantasy and ourselves is a cut into the fabric of reality. It changes things. So we're not falling into this cosmic sense of wholeness. If we're getting into the cosmos, the human gene, history, family in a broad sense, like a genetic one, these are all ways of washing away that cut. So Weird Girl is incredibly useful. It's a very transporting way of engaging fiction that I think is primary, necessary, not just a genre. Let me know what you think is Weird Girl that might not be considered Weird Girl. I think there's a lot out there.